My name is Dot, and I'm 34 years old. I built my pediatric clinic from nothing after medical school, working 80-hour weeks and paying off $300,000 in student loans. Everything changed at a family dinner last month when my parents showed up with legal documents trying to claim what I'd built through years of sacrifice. They never expected me to pull out my own paperwork. If you're watching this from a place where your family respects your boundaries, drop a heart in the comments. Before I continue, hit subscribe to follow more stories about standing your ground when it matters most. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, where the houses were modest but neat and everyone knew everyone. Our family looked normal from the outside: 2 parents, 2 daughters, a golden retriever named Sandy. But inside those walls there was always an unspoken hierarchy. My younger sister Heather was the golden child from the moment she was born when I was 4 years old. My parents Thomas and Laura weren't awful people. They just made it abundantly clear where their attention and resources would go. Heather was the pretty one, the social butterfly who brought home friends by the dozen. I was the quiet, studious one who preferred books to parties. That difference shaped everything. My interest in medicine began when I was 8 years old and spent 2 weeks in the hospital with a severe case of pneumonia. The pediatrician who treated me, Dr. Angela Wilson, had this incredible way of explaining things to me, making me feel brave instead of scared. She'd sit on the edge of my bed during rounds and talk directly to me, not just to my parents like the other doctors did. "You have strong lungs," she told me. "They're just fighting a battle right now, and we're sending in reinforcements." After I recovered, I announced to my family that I wanted to be a doctor when I grew up. My dad chuckled and patted my head. "That's a nice dream, Dot, but medical school is very expensive. Maybe think about nursing instead." My mother nodded in agreement. "Doctors work such long hours too. Don't you want to have a family someday?" I was too young to understand the subtle message. Dream smaller, want less. Don't reach beyond what we think you deserve. As the years passed, my determination only grew stronger. In high school, while Heather was being crowned homecoming queen, I was working weekends at the local pharmacy and evenings tutoring younger students. Every dollar went into my college fund. When my parents drove Heather to dance competitions in their SUV, I took the bus to science fairs alone. My junior year, I won a regional science competition with a project on antibiotic resistance. The prize was $500 and a feature in the local newspaper. My parents put the newspaper clipping on the refrigerator, but the next week it was covered by Heather's casting call for a community theater production. The $500 went straight into my college fund, which by graduation had grown to just over $8,000, nowhere near enough for pre-med, but it was a start. When my acceptance letter to State University arrived, my parents' reaction was lukewarm at best. "College is expensive," my father warned. "You should consider community college first." 2 weeks later, when Heather was accepted to a private arts college with a price tag 3 times higher than state, they threw her a party and announced they'd been saving for her education since she was born. There had been no such fund for me. I took out student loans, applied for every scholarship I could find, and worked 30 hours a week at a campus cafeteria while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. During holiday breaks, I picked up extra shifts at the pharmacy back home. While my peers were enjoying spring breaks and summer vacations, I was volunteering at hospitals to build my medical school application. When I came home for Christmas my sophomore year, I overheard my mother telling a neighbor, "Dot's so serious about this doctor thing. We keep telling her not to work so hard, but she never listens." The truth was, they never told me to take it easier. They simply never believed I could do it. The day my medical school acceptance letter arrived was the first time I saw a flicker of genuine pride in my father's eyes. It was quickly followed by concern about the cost. When I explained that I'd received a partial scholarship and would be taking out loans for the rest, my mother sighed dramatically. "All that debt, Dot. Is it really worth it?" Meanwhile, they paid for Heather's semester abroad in Paris. An essential part of her arts education, they explained. Medical school was brutal but exhilarating. I thrived on the challenge even as my debt mounted. When I called home during my first year exhausted from 36-hour shifts as a resident, my mother would interrupt with stories about Heather's latest audition or gallery showing. By graduation, I had over $300,000 in student loan debt, but I also had my Doctor of Medicine degree. My parents attended the ceremony, of course, but left early to make it to Heather's one-line appearance in a community theater production. When I look back at those years, I don't feel bitter. Not exactly. What I feel is a kind of sadness that they couldn't see what I was building, not just a career, but a sense of purpose. All they could see was that I wasn't following the script they'd written for me, the one where I settled for less and stayed safely within their expectations. Little did I know then that their script for me would eventually include handing over what I built to the child they always favored. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Medical school graduation was just the beginning of another grueling chapter. With more than $300,000 in student loans looming over me, I immediately started working at Westside Community Health Center, a busy clinic serving lower-income neighborhoods. The pay wasn't competitive with private practice, but the experience was invaluable. I lived in a studio apartment that was barely 500 square feet, with a futon that doubled as my bed and couch. My kitchen consisted of a mini fridge, a microwave, and a hot plate. Every month, 60% of my paycheck went straight to student loan payments. The remaining 40% covered rent, utilities, ramen noodles, and the occasional splurge of fresh vegetables. Working at Westside opened my eyes to a critical gap in our healthcare system. The community needed specialized pediatric care that was both accessible and comprehensive. The existing pediatric offices were either overcrowded with long wait times or located in affluent neighborhoods, making them inaccessible to working-class families. After 3 years at Westside, I began researching what it would take to open my own pediatric clinic. I spent my evenings and weekends developing a business plan, calculating startup costs, and scouting potential locations. According to my estimates, I would need approximately $400,000 to get started. When I approached my first bank for a business loan, the loan officer barely glanced at my meticulously prepared business plan. "Do you have any collateral?" he asked, looking over my simple attire. When I explained that my assets were limited due to student loan debt, he closed my folder. "Perhaps you should consider working for an established practice instead." 5 banks later, I finally found one willing to take a chance on me, though the interest rate was higher than I'd hoped. The loan officer, a woman named Diana, looked me in the eye and said, "Your numbers make sense and your passion is evident. I'm approving this loan because I believe in what you're building." With loan in hand, I found the perfect location, an old dental office, in a neighborhood that desperately needed pediatric services. The building needed significant renovation, but the bones were good. I negotiated a lease with option to buy after 5 years, and threw myself into transforming the space. During the renovation phase, I continued working full-time at Westside while spending every evening at the new location. I painted walls myself to save money, chose furniture that was both functional and comforting for children, and designed an office layout that would maximize efficiency without feeling clinical. On opening day, Sunshine Pediatrics consisted of me, one nurse named Margot, and a receptionist divided by office manager named Tina. My parents sent flowers but didn't attend the small opening celebration. "Heather has an important audition that day," my mother explained. The first year was brutal. I worked 14-hour days, 6 days a week. Some nights I slept on the exam table rather than drive home. Patient volume grew slowly, primarily through word of mouth. There were months I wasn't sure I could make payroll, and I skipped my own salary more than once to ensure Margot and Tina got paid. My personal life was non-existent. Friends from medical school got married, had children, bought houses, all while I poured everything into my clinic. On rare visits home, my parents would ask, "Isn't it time to think about settling down?" never understanding that I was building something that mattered deeply to me. By the second year, we were established enough to hire another nurse and a part-time pediatrician. We expanded our hours to accommodate working parents, offering early morning and evening appointments. I implemented a sliding scale payment system for families without insurance. The third year brought steady growth. We added a child psychologist to our staff, recognizing that mental health was an essential component of comprehensive care. Our waiting room was redesigned with interactive learning stations where children could play while waiting. We instituted Sunshine Saturdays once a month, offering free wellness checks for uninsured children. By year 4, Sunshine Pediatrics had 15 staff members, including 3 full-time pediatricians, including myself, a nurse practitioner, 4 nurses, a child psychologist, a nutritionist, a social worker, 3 administrative staff, and a 4 NS, billing specialist. We were serving over 2,000 families from the surrounding neighborhoods. Most importantly, we were finally profitable. I was able to refinance my business loan at a better rate increase, staff salaries, and even begin paying myself a reasonable wage. I moved out of my tiny apartment into a small but comfortable two-bedroom condo. The clinic became known throughout Portland for our comprehensive approach to children's health. We didn't just treat illnesses, we partnered with families to promote wellness. Our patients received not only medical care but also nutrition guidance, mental health support, and connection to community resources. Local newspapers featured Sunshine Pediatrics as a success story, a woman-owned business serving an underserved community while thriving financially. One article included a photo of me standing proudly in front of the clinic surrounded by my dedicated staff. It was that article that seemed to catch my family's attention in a new way. The day after it was published, my phone rang. It was my mother. Darling, we had no idea your little clinic was doing so well," she gushed. "Your father and I are just so proud." It was the first time I'd heard genuine enthusiasm from her about my career. What I didn't realize then was that her newfound interest wasn't just pride, it was the beginning of something far more complicated. That newspaper article marked a turning point in my family's attitude toward my clinic. Suddenly, the little doctor's office they had dismissed for years became Dot's successful medical practice in their conversations. The timing wasn't coincidental. That same month, my sister Heather lost her job at a gallery where she'd been working as an events coordinator. According to my mother, it was a complete misunderstanding over some missing inventory, though the details remained conveniently vague. Heather moved back into my parents' house at 30 years old, bringing her collection of half-finished art projects and a surprising sense of entitlement. The first request came about 2 weeks after Heather moved home. My mother called on a Tuesday evening while I was finishing patient charts. Sweetie, I hate to bother you when I know you're so busy with your practice, but I was wondering if you might help Heather out with a small loan, just until she finds her footing again." The small loan turned out to be $6,000 for a life coaching certification program that would apparently transform Heather's career prospects. I sent $3,000 with the clear understanding it was a one-time assistance. The certification program was never mentioned again. 3 weeks later, my father began dropping by the clinic during business hours. The first time he brought coffee for the staff, which was thoughtful. By the third visit, he was sitting in the waiting room offering unsolicited advice to parents about childhood ailments. "Dad, while I appreciate the visit, this is a professional medical office," I explained gently after finding him telling a mother that her child's rash could be treated with a household vinegar solution. "We need to maintain certain standards." He looked hurt. "I'm just trying to help Dottie. You seem so overwhelmed with all this." He gestured around the efficiently running clinic with its full waiting room and dedicated staff. "I have some ideas about how you could streamline operations." It turned out my father, who had worked in insurance sales his entire career, had developed strong opinions about how a pediatric clinic should be run. His suggestions included reducing staff too many nurses, cutting our sliding scale payment program, charity cases don't pay, and focusing on premium services for clients who can afford them. Each time I thanked him politely and explained why those changes would undermine our mission. Each time he left looking dissatisfied with my response. My mother's approach was different, but equally intrusive. She began bringing friends to tour the clinic without appointment or warning. These friends invariably turned out to be people she'd met who had money to invest. "This is Jackson," she announced one particularly busy afternoon, strolling into the clinic with a man in an expensive suit. "He's very successful in real estate development and is interested in expanding medical offices throughout the region." I had to step out of an exam with a young patient to address this interruption, only to discover that Jackson hadn't actually expressed any specific interest in pediatric clinics. My mother had simply told him her daughter had a charming little medical practice that was ripe for expansion. After the third such incident, I sat my mother down for a serious conversation. "Mom, I appreciate that you're proud of what I've built, but you can't bring potential investors to my clinic without discussing it with me first. We're not looking for outside investment." She looked genuinely perplexed. "But don't you want to grow? Think how impressive it would be to have multiple locations." "The clinic is growing at exactly the pace I'm comfortable with," I explained. "Any expansion will happen according to my business plan, not through outside investors." She patted my hand in that dismissive way I'd known since childhood. You always did think small. That's why you need family to help you see the bigger picture. The comments became more frequent. At a rare family dinner, my father casually mentioned that with proper management, Sunshine Pediatrics could be franchised across the state. My mother suggested that the clinic's name should be changed to something more professional if we wanted to attract the right clientele. Then came the most concerning development. My cousin Brittany called one evening to congratulate me on the new family business arrangement. What arrangement? I asked, confused. Oh. Brittany hesitated. Heather mentioned she was going to be helping run your clinic. Something about bringing her creative vision to the business side of things. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. That's the first I've heard of it. After that call, I started hearing similar comments from other extended family members. Apparently, Heather had been telling everyone she was going to save my clinic from my limited business vision and transform it into a premium healthcare brand. When I confronted my sister during a family Sunday dinner, she shrugged carelessly. Mom and Dad think the clinic could use a fresh perspective. I have a lot of connections in the community that could bring in a better class of patients. Better class, I repeated, stunned by her phrasing. You know what I mean, she said, waving her hand dismissively. People who can actually afford to pay full price. I looked to my parents, expecting them to correct this misconception. Instead, my father nodded along while my mother refilled Heather's wine glass. We're just thinking about your future, my mother said soothingly. You work so hard with those underprivileged families. Wouldn't it be nice to have a more sustainable business model? I left that dinner early with the uncomfortable realization that my family had been making plans for my clinic without my knowledge or consent. Still, lifelong patterns of avoiding family confrontation kept me from addressing it directly. I'd always been the peacekeeper, the one who accommodated others to avoid conflict. But something had changed in me through the years of building my clinic. I'd developed a backbone I never had as a child. I'd stood up to banks, landlords, insurance companies, and difficult situations. I wasn't the same person who accepted being overlooked. Yet old habits die hard. Instead of confronting my family directly, I found myself avoiding their calls, making excuses to skip Sunday dinners, and changing the subject whenever the clinic came up in conversation. That strategy might have continued indefinitely if not for the invitation that arrived by text one Tuesday afternoon, dinner this Friday at Carluccio's 7 p.m. To celebrate your success, love Mom and Dad. Carluccio's was the fancy Italian restaurant reserved for special occasions in our family. The extravagance of the invitation should have been my first warning. The second warning came when I arrived and saw Heather's luxury sedan parked outside the one our parents had helped her finance despite her spotty employment history. I had no idea I was walking into an ambush, but looking back, all the signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. Carluccio's hadn't changed since the last time we'd celebrated there, my father's 60th birthday 3 years earlier. The same dim lighting, white tablecloths, and the faint scent of garlic and wine in the air. A pianist played softly in the corner as the maitre d' led me to our table. My family was already seated, my father in his best blazer, mother wearing her pearl necklace, and Heather dressed as if for a business meeting in a sleek black pantsuit. A leather briefcase rested against her chair. I should have recognized it as a red flag, but I was still naively hoping this was genuinely a celebration dinner. My mother rose to kiss my cheek. Don't you look nice? Though you could have worn something a bit more special for the occasion. She glanced disapprovingly at my simple blue dress, the only non-work attire I'd had time to change into after a full day at the clinic. Sorry I'm a bit late, I said, taking the empty seat. We had a last-minute patient 5-year-old with a broken arm from a playground fall. Always the dedicated doctor, my father said, with an approving nod that warmed me despite everything. Those small moments of approval still meant something even at 34. I ordered a bottle of the Barolo, he continued, gesturing to the wine already poured into my glass. A proper celebration deserves proper wine. What exactly are we celebrating? I asked, taking a sip. The wine was excellent and expensive. My father never splurged like this without reason. Your success, of course. My mother beamed. The clinic's 5-year anniversary is coming up, isn't it? In 3 months, yes, I confirmed, surprised she had remembered. 5 years in business is significant, my father added. Most small businesses fail in the first 3. The conversation flowed pleasantly through appetizers. My parents asked questions about the clinic that seemed genuinely interested rather than critical for once. Heather was uncharacteristically quiet, sipping her wine and checking her phone occasionally. By the time our entrees arrived, I had almost relaxed. Maybe this really was just a celebration dinner. Maybe I had misjudged their intentions. Then my father set down his fork, dabbed his mouth with his napkin, and cleared his throat, his signal that he was about to make an announcement. "Dot, we've been thinking a lot about your future lately," he began. "About the clinic and its potential." My stomach tightened. Here it comes, I thought. "We have a proposal that will help everyone," he continued, nodding to my mother. On cue, she reached into her large handbag and pulled out a manila envelope, legal-sized. My heart sank as she placed it on the table beside her plate. "As you know, Heather's been at a crossroads career-wise," my father continued, "and it occurred to us that her talents could be perfectly utilized to help take Sunshine Pediatrics to the next level." Heather finally looked up from her phone, a practiced smile on her face. "I've been developing some amazing ideas for rebranding the clinic," she said, reaching for her briefcase. "I'm thinking Sunshine is a bit childish. Premier Pediatric Partners has a more upscale ring to it, don't you think?" I stared at her, then at my parents, unable to form words as the reality of what was happening sank in. My mother opened the manila envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. Legal documents, I realized with growing horror. They'd prepared legal documents. "We had these drawn up by Gerald Thompson, you remember him, your father's golf buddy who practices law," my mother said, sliding the papers toward me. "It's all very straightforward." "What exactly is it?" I finally managed to ask, not touching the documents. My father leaned forward, using his persuasive insurance salesman voice. "A new operating agreement for the clinic. Essentially, Heather would come on as managing partner, handling the business side while you focus on what you do best, the medical work." "Managing partner," I repeated slowly. "Yes," Heather chimed in eagerly. "I'd handle marketing, branding, client acquisition, all the business stuff you hate. We'd reposition to attract a more affluent clientele, maybe add some cosmetic services that have higher profit margins." "The agreement gives Heather 25% of the profits," my father continued, as if this were the most reasonable proposal in the world, in exchange for her expertise and connections. My mother nodded. "And since we're family and have always supported your dreams, your father and I would receive a modest 10% as founding investors." "Founding investors," I echoed, my voice barely audible over the blood rushing in my ears. "You never invested $1 in my clinic." My mother's smile tightened. "We invested in you, Dot. All those years of raising you, supporting you." "We paid for your undergraduate degree," my father added, though this was blatantly untrue. My scholarships and student loans had covered every penny. "This arrangement benefits everyone," my mother continued smoothly. "You get help running the business side. Heather gets a new career path, and we all share in the success as a family. That's what families do, they help each other." I sat in stunned silence as they pushed the papers closer to me. My sister pulled a pen from her briefcase and held it out expectantly. "We should toast, Heather," said, raising her wine glass. "To family business ventures." My parents lifted their glasses, watching me expectantly. In that moment, staring at their smiling faces, a lifetime of memories flashed through my mind. Every dismissed achievement, every comparison to Heather, every time I'd been made to feel that my dreams were less important. And now here they were expecting me to hand over a quarter of what I'd built through years of sacrifice to a sister who'd never shown the slightest interest in medicine or in my clinic until it became successful. And another 10% to parents who had contributed nothing but doubt. They had planned this ambush carefully, choosing a public restaurant where they thought I wouldn't make a scene. They knew my conflict-avoidant nature. They expected me to sign just to keep the peace, as I had done so many times before. But they had miscalculated badly. They didn't know the woman I had become. The restaurant continued its normal evening hum around us, silverware clinking against plates, the pianist playing a soft melody, waiters moving efficiently between tables. But at our table time seemed suspended as I stared at the legal documents before me. My heart hammered against my ribs. My hands, which remained steady during the most delicate pediatric procedures, trembled slightly as I reached for my water glass. I took a slow sip, using those seconds to compose myself. A montage of memories flashed through my mind. Being told medical school was too expensive while Heather's arts college was worth every penny. Working double shifts to pay tuition while my sister spent a semester in Paris. Celebrating the clinic's opening alone because my parents were at Heather's community theater performance. All those years of minimized achievements and diverted attention had built to this moment this breathtaking display of entitlement. I set down my water glass carefully and looked each family member in the eye before speaking. My voice came out calm and clear, surprising even me with its steadiness. "Let me make sure I understand this proposal correctly," I said. "Heather, who has no medical training, no business degree, and no experience running a healthcare facility, would become managing partner of the clinic I built. She would receive 25% of the profits for rebranding the practice I spent 5 years building. And you two," I turned to my parents, "would receive 10% as founding investors, despite never having invested a single dollar in the clinic." My mother's smile faltered. "When you put it like that, it sounds so transactional. We're family. "Yes, we're family," I agreed, which makes this all the more disappointing. I reached down for my own briefcase, the one I'd brought because I'd planned to review patient files after dinner. Opening it, I extracted a bound document and placed it on the table. "This is the operating agreement for Sunshine Pediatrics," I said, flipping to a tabbed section. "I always carry important documents with me. Professional habit." My father frowned, clearly not expecting this turn of events. "What's your point?" I turned the document toward them and pointed to a specific section. Clause 4.3 specifically addresses ownership transfer requirements. It states that any ownership stake in Sunshine Pediatrics can only be transferred to a licensed medical professional who has been approved by a unanimous vote of existing partners, which currently consists of just me. I watched my father's face as he read the clause. His expression froze as the implications sank in. He was a man who understood contracts. He'd sold insurance for 30 years, and he recognized ironclad language when he saw it. Furthermore, I continued, turning to the next tabbed section. Clause 7.2 requires that any investor must demonstrate prior financial contribution to the business equal to or greater than the percentage of ownership sought. My mother's smile had completely vanished now. "Surely these technical details can be amended for family," she said, her voice losing its warmth. "That's not how legal agreements work, Mom," I replied. "I had this document drawn up specifically to protect what I built." My lawyer was very thorough. Heather's face had turned an interesting shade of red. "This is ridiculous. We're trying to help you. Your little clinic could be so much more with proper management." "My little clinic serves 2,000 families, employs 15 people with full benefits, and has been recognized by the State Medical Association for excellence in pediatric care," I said, closing my operating agreement. "It doesn't need to be more. It's exactly what I intended it to be: accessible health care for children who need it." My father tried a different approach. "Be reasonable. Heather needs this opportunity. She's been struggling to find her path." "And I sympathize with that," I said sincerely. "But my clinic is not her backup plan. It's my life's work." My mother's expression shifted to the guilt technique she'd perfected over the years. "After all we've done for you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "All the sacrifices we made for your education." For the first time, I interrupted her. "What sacrifices exactly, Mom?" "I paid for my education with scholarships and loans that I'm still paying off. You contributed nothing toward medical school and only partially toward my undergraduate degree while fully funding Heather's education, including her semester abroad." The table fell silent at this unprecedented directness from me. I had never confronted them so bluntly before. Heather was the first to recover, her voice rising in anger. "You've always been selfish. Just because you're some hotshot doctor doesn't mean you're better than everyone else. This is exactly why nobody likes spending time with you. You think you're so special." Rather than engaging with her tantrum, I calmly gathered my operating agreement and returned it to my briefcase. Then I signaled for the waiter. "I'll take the check, please," I said when he approached. "I've got it," my father interjected, reaching for his wallet. "No, Dad, I've got it." I handed my credit card to the waiter. "Consider it my treat for this enlightening evening." While waiting for the waiter to return, I looked at my family. Really looked at them. My father avoiding eye contact, his confident demeanor deflated. My mother, lips pressed thin in disappointment. Heather sulking like the child she had never quite grown beyond being. For the first time, I saw them clearly, not as the all-powerful figures of my childhood, but as three people who had convinced themselves they were entitled to the fruits of someone else's labor. When the waiter returned with my card, I signed the receipt, including a generous tip. Then I stood up. "I love you all," I said, and I meant it despite everything. But this clinic discussion is permanently closed. If you want to have a relationship with me going forward, it will need to be one based on mutual respect, not on what you can get from me. I walked out of Carluccio's with my head held high, leaving behind their shocked expressions and the legal documents they had been so certain I would sign. In my car, the professional composure I had maintained finally cracked. Tears streamed down my face as I gripped the steering wheel, not from sadness, but from a strange mixture of anger, relief, and pride. For the first time in my life, I had truly stood up for myself against my family. It hurt, but it also felt like freedom. The fallout was immediate and intense. By the time I reached my condo, my phone was already lighting up with texts and calls. I silenced it and placed it face down on my nightstand. Whatever they had to say could wait until morning. I slept surprisingly well that night, as if standing up for myself had lifted a weight I hadn't fully recognized I was carrying. The next morning, I reviewed the messages, 14 texts from my mother, ranging from guilt trips. "How could you embarrass us like that?" to faux concern. "We're worried about your stress levels." 8 missed calls from my father, a single text from Heather that consisted entirely of colorful expletives. I responded with a brief message to my parents. "I need some space to process what happened. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk." Then I went to work, throwing myself into caring for my patients with renewed appreciation for the clinic I had built. The familiar rhythm of well-child visits, vaccinations, and concerned parent consultations felt like a sanctuary after the previous night's confrontation. But family estrangements don't happen in isolation, especially in close-knit extended families like mine. By the end of the week, I was receiving calls and messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins, most of whom had only heard my parents' version of events, that I had cruelly rejected a generous offer to help my struggling sister. Aunt Patricia called while I was reviewing lab results. "Your mother is heartbroken. She says you called them terrible parents right in the middle of Carluccio's." "That's not what happened, Aunt Patricia," I explained calmly. "They presented me with legal documents trying to claim 35% of my business without contributing anything." "Well, family helps family," she insisted. "Your sister needs direction in her life." After the 5th such call, I stopped answering numbers I didn't recognize. The most hurtful development came a week after the dinner, when I discovered Heather had posted on social media about her selfish sister who refused to help family despite her privileged position as a doctor. The post had gathered sympathetic comments from mutual acquaintances who knew nothing of the actual situation. I didn't respond publicly. Engaging would only fuel the drama. Instead, I made the difficult decision to temporarily block my family on social media and limit contact to email only. It was a boundary I had never established before, and doing so felt both terrifying and necessary. 2 weeks after the dinner confrontation, I had my regular session with Dr. Lauren Green, the therapist I had been seeing since my second year of medical school. Originally, I'd sought help for anxiety related to medical training, but our work had evolved to include processing my family dynamics. "How are you feeling about the boundary you've set?" she asked after I'd recounted the recent events. "Guilty," I admitted, but also relieved. "Is that terrible?" Dr. Green shook her head. "It's a normal response to finally prioritizing your own well-being. The guilt comes from lifelong conditioning to put others' needs before your own. The relief comes from finally honoring your truth." We spent the session exploring the difference between cutting contact out of punishment versus creating space for healing. "You're not doing this to hurt them," she reminded me. "You're doing it to protect what you've built, both your clinic and your sense of self." At work, my staff noticed the change in me. Margot, my head nurse, who had been with me since day one, commented that I seemed lighter somehow. Tina, my office manager, remarked that I was setting clearer boundaries with demanding patients. "Whatever's changed, it looks good on you, Dr. Dot," she said with approval. My cousin Sam, my father's brother's son, reached out with unexpected support. Sam had always been something of a family outlier himself, choosing a career in environmental science over the family insurance business. I heard about what happened, he said, when we met for coffee. Not the real estate version my parents got, but Heather's been running her mouth at family gatherings. When I explained the actual proposal, Sam whistled low. That's incredibly entitled even for Heather. Am I overreacting by keeping my distance? I asked him, valuing his perspective as someone who knew my family dynamics. Hell no, he said firmly. What they tried to do was a hostile takeover disguised as family help. You built something amazing, Dot. Don't let anyone diminish that or try to take it from you. His validation meant more than he could know. For the first time, I had a family member who saw the situation clearly and supported my response. As weeks turned into months, I began to recognize something important: my success had triggered my family's insecurity. My parents had always defined success by traditional standards: marriage, children, a comfortable but conventional life. My sister had been raised to expect recognition for minimal effort. My achievement building a thriving medical practice through years of sacrifice and hard work challenged their worldview. Rather than reconsider their perception, they tried to reclaim control by inserting themselves into my success story. Understanding this dynamic didn't excuse their behavior, but it helped me process it without internalizing their judgment. This wasn't about me failing as a daughter or sister. It was about them failing to respect me as an independent adult with my own path. 3 months after the confrontation, I received a letter from my parents' lawyer asking me to reconsider the family business proposal. It was the confirmation I needed that further protective measures were warranted. I scheduled a meeting with Elizabeth Yang, the sharp, no-nonsense attorney who had helped me establish my original operating agreement. I want to ensure the clinic is completely protected, I told her. Not just during my lifetime, but in perpetuity. Elizabeth helped me establish additional legal protections, including a clear succession plan, specifying that if anything happened to me, the clinic would transfer to a trust designed to maintain its mission of accessible pediatric care. We created explicit language prohibiting any transfer of ownership to specific named individuals, including my immediate family members. Is this excessive? I asked Elizabeth as we reviewed the documents. She fixed me with a steady gaze. I've seen family business disputes destroy not just relationships but generations of hard work. This isn't excessive, it's prudent. The first holiday season after the confrontation was the hardest. Thanksgiving had always been spent at my parents' house with my mother's traditional turkey and my father's terrible jokes. Instead, I accepted an invitation from Margot to join her family's celebration. Fair warning, she had said. My 3 kids are loud. My husband thinks he's a gourmet chef, but burns everything, and my mother will ask at least twice when you're getting married. It was chaotic, warm, and filled with genuine affection, a stark contrast to the performance of family harmony I'd grown up with. Christmas brought a tentative text from my mother. We miss you. Please come home for Christmas Eve. Just family dinner, no business talk. I declined politely, having already committed to volunteering at the children's hospital. It was the first time I'd said no to a family holiday invitation without offering elaborate excuses or apologies. Another small step in my journey toward authentic relationships. New Year's Eve found me hosting a small gathering at my condo for clinic staff and a few close friends. As midnight approached, Tina raised her glass for a toast. To Dr. Dot, who shows us every day what it means to stand up for what matters. Looking around at these people who supported my vision and respected my boundaries, I felt something I had rarely experienced with my biological family. I felt seen for who I actually was. The road ahead with my family would be long and uncertain, but for the first time I was walking it on my own terms. 6 months of limited contact created space for profound reflection. The distance allowed me to see patterns in our family dynamic that had been invisible when I was immersed in them daily. I came to understand that my parents' behavior wasn't purely malicious. They genuinely believed families should share resources, but their definition of sharing was disturbingly one-sided. During this period, I found unexpected peace in the community I had built around me. My clinic staff had become a chosen family. We celebrated birthdays together, supported each other through personal challenges, and shared the daily triumphs of helping children thrive. My friend circle expanded beyond medicine to include neighbors, a book club, and a weekend hiking group. These relationships were refreshingly straightforward, based on mutual respect and genuine connection, rather than obligation or history. After much consideration and several sessions with Dr. Green, I decided to write my parents a letter, outlining the terms under which I was willing to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't an angry letter, but it was direct in a way I had never been before. I value family and would like to maintain a relationship with you, but only if we can establish new patterns of interaction. I will not discuss the clinic's management or ownership; those subjects are permanently off the table. I will not tolerate comparisons to Heather or suggestions about how I should live my life. I will expect respect for my boundaries, just as I will respect yours. If these terms are acceptable, I would like to meet for lunch next Sunday to begin rebuilding our relationship. Their initial response was rejection. My mother called it coldly transactional, and my father said I was treating family like business associates. I stood firm, reiterating that these were my conditions for moving forward. 3 weeks later, I received a brief note from my father: lunch at Riverside Cafe, 1 o'clock Sunday. It wasn't an explicit acceptance of my terms, but it was an opening. That first lunch was awkward. We talked about neutral topics: the weather, a new restaurant that had opened downtown, a movie my mother had enjoyed. No mention was made of Heather or the clinic. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. It was a start. Our second meeting included a suggestion from my father. We might benefit from some professional guidance in rebuilding our relationship. It was the most self-aware statement I'd ever heard from him. We began monthly sessions with a family therapist, Dr. Marcus Rivera. The first session was tense, with my mother in tears and my father defensive, but Dr. Rivera was skilled at navigating family dynamics. The goal isn't to assign blame, he explained. It's to understand each person's perspective and establish healthier patterns of communication. Progress was painstakingly slow. We had decades of dysfunction to unravel. There were sessions where voices raised and old hurts resurfaced. There were canceled appointments after particularly difficult discussions. But gradually, incrementally, things began to change. My mother had a breakthrough in our fourth session when Dr. Rivera asked her to articulate why my success felt threatening. Her answer surprised all of us, including herself. I always defined myself as a mother, she admitted, tears streaming down her face. When Dot succeeded without our help, what did that make me? What was my purpose if my children didn't need me? It was the first genuine moment of vulnerability I'd ever witnessed from her. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped me understand it. My father had his moment 2 sessions later when he confessed that he had always regretted not pursuing his own dream of becoming an architect. I took the safe route with insurance, he said quietly. When Dot chased her dream, despite all the obstacles, despite our discouragement, it made me question every choice I'd ever made. Heather was the last to join our family sessions, attending only after 6 months of therapy between our parents and me. Her initial attitude was combative, but even she couldn't maintain her defenses in the face of Dr. Rivera's gentle but persistent questioning. Why was it so important to have a role in Dot's clinic specifically, he asked her during her second session. Heather's response, when it finally came, was painfully honest. Because she built something real. All my life I've started things and abandoned them. Art school, acting gallery work. Nothing stuck. Dot created something lasting, something important. I wanted to be part of something that mattered. It was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get from her, but it was enough to begin a cautious rebuilding of our relationship. Over the next year, Heather found her own path. With encouragement from Dr. Rivera, she explored career options that aligned with her actual interests rather than momentary impulses. She eventually found her niche in arts administration, coordinating children's programs at the Portland Art Museum, a role that utilized her creative background and organizational skills. Our parents, too, began changing in small but significant ways. My mother volunteered at a literacy program, finding purpose in helping others rather than managing her daughters' lives. My father took an architecture appreciation course at the community college, a small step toward acknowledging his deferred dreams. As for the clinic, it continued to thrive and expand in ways that honored its original mission. We opened a satellite office in another underserved neighborhood. We established a partnership with the local medical school to create a pediatric residency program focused on community health. Most meaningful to me was the scholarship fund I created for aspiring doctors from low-income backgrounds. Each year, we provided financial support to 2 pre-med students who demonstrated both academic excellence and commitment to serving vulnerable populations. It was my way of addressing the barriers I had faced and creating opportunity for the next generation. Through it all, I maintained the clear boundaries I had established. My family was never again involved in any aspect of the clinic's operations or finances. Our relationships improved precisely because these boundaries were respected. 2 years after that fateful dinner at Carluccio's, we gathered there again, this time to genuinely celebrate the clinic's 7th anniversary. The conversation was easier, the laughter more authentic. When my father raised his glass for a toast, his words reflected how far we had come. To Dot, he said, who taught us all that success isn't just about what you build, but about having the strength to protect it. We're proud of you not because of what you've created, but because of who you are. That night, driving home from the restaurant, I reflected on the journey. The hardest lesson had been that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and ultimately for others is to stand firm in your truth. My refusal to capitulate hadn't destroyed my family. It had created the opportunity for something healthier to emerge from the ashes of old patterns. I had built my clinic from scratch through years of sacrifice and determination. In protecting it from those who would claim it without contributing, I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. That strength now underpinned every aspect of my life, professional and personal. My name is Dot, and this is my story of building something that matters and finding the courage to protect it. If you've ever had to stand your ground against those who should have supported you, share your experience in the comments below. Remember that establishing boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for healthy relationships. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you for listening. And remember, what you build with your own hands deserves to be protected with your whole heart.